What's going on, guys? It's Zach here. Bring you guys from a fantasy football video. So we'll be going over every single matchup in Week 7, aside from the Thursday night matchup we just had between the Saints and the Jaguars, and going over which players think should be in your fantasy lineups, which players should stay on your benches. Thursday night football was an okay game. It was kind of a boring first half. We at least got a fun finish. I personally am getting very tired of watching Derek Carr play football. He doesn't look downfield. He's just dumping it off to Alvin Kamara every time, and it's really hurting Chris Olave. He had 15 targets yesterday and only put up 7 for 57. I definitely buying low on Chris Olave going forward. Nothing to be worried about there, but certainly getting tired of seeing Derek Carr just dump it down over and over. But yeah, with that, it should be really exciting. Week 7, we've got a lot of really good games in the matchup or on the docket. We've also got a lot of bye weeks, a lot of injuries. So there's going to be a lot of really questionable start-sit decisions that you guys have to make. And as always, any specific start-sit questions you guys have, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'd love helping you guys get those lineups set and sort of giving you guys my opinions. So I'll be here making sure I get all my responses out to any comments you guys leave, and making sure that I can do my best to help you this week. But should be a big week. It's a big week for a lot of us. A lot of us are 2-4 and need to win. A lot of us are maybe 4-2, 5-1, and really just want to separate ourselves and really push towards that bye. So a big week here, and hopefully we can get your lineups as set as possible. So yeah, with that, let's get into the first game here. So starting us off with the Falcons at the Buccaneers. On the Falcons side of the ball, I think it's pretty easy. Bijan Robinson obviously needs to be in your lineups. I know he's been a little bit underwhelming so far. He's the running back 10 overall in the season right now. He just hasn't really scored on many touchdowns. I believe he has 0 rushing touchdowns at this point in the season with 2 receiving touchdowns. He's an explosive player. They're going to utilize him more near the goal line at some point. I think the breakout's coming for Bijan, so you obviously just got to keep playing him. Drake London needs a solid wide receiver 3, maybe even a low-end wide receiver 2 option. That one is currently sort of looking like a bit of a miss on my part, and he might actually end up being better than I thought he was going to be coming into the season, although I do think the Falcons are throwing the ball a lot more than they want to going forward, so I do expect that there to be a little bit of regression there for Drake London, but it's a positive matchup for him against the Buccaneers. Johnny Smith and Kyle Pitts are both like low-end tight end ones for me. They're both pretty much equally involved in this offense. They're throwing to the tight end more than anyone else in the NFL, but the problem is it's going to 2 of them, so it's tough to know which one's going to have the good week. Obviously, Kyle Pitts got the touchdown last week, but Johnny Smith had more receptions and yardage, so I think you can play them both as low-end options, but I'm not excited about either one of them. For the Buccaneers, Rachaad White, he's a low-end running back too, just because we've got so many injuries and buys. You've got to play him probably if you have him. The volume's guaranteed, but it is a pretty brutal matchup against the Falcons, who really don't give up anything on the ground. So you're banking on Rachaad White catching a lot of passes. And also, I do want to point out that Keyshawn Vaughn did get some work last week. He obviously wasn't very efficient with it, but they sort of, at least there was a bit of a change in the guard behind Rachaad White. Instead of Sean Tucker, it was Keyshawn Vaughn. So just keep an eye on that, but nothing you need to worry about this week. Outside of that, for the Buccaneers, Mike Evans, he's a wide receiver 2. You've got to start him. Chris Godwin, he'd be a wide receiver 3 option for me. I wouldn't play Cade Otton. He's running a lot of routes, but he's not being very involved in the offense, and I would sit both quarterbacks in this one. Although I do sort of think you could stream Baker Mayfield if you desperately needed to, but I think there are better options available for you, so I probably wouldn't do that this week. Next, we've got the Raiders at the Bears, and what's hopefully going to be the squeaky wheel game for Devontae Adams. He came out and was pretty frustrated about his role in the offense earlier this week. He talked a lot about how he wants to be more involved. He wants to be a focal point of the offense, and it makes a lot of sense. If this offense or this team wants to go places, they need to involve Devontae Adams as a focal point. He's a guy that can take them over the top on offense. They certainly need to use him more. This is a really good matchup to do that, so I think Devontae Adams could have a blow-up game this week. Obviously, Josh Jacobs and Jacoby Myers are going to be in your lineups as well. Jacoby Myers has been fantastic so far this season. He's the wide receiver 11 on the season, the wide receiver 11 and expected fantasy points as well. He's not getting lucky by any means. He's just a really important member of this offense, and you've got to keep playing Jacoby Myers. Michael Mayer, I think you can stream him at the tight end position, but it sort of feels like you're chasing last week. I don't think the Raiders are going to have to score too many points to win this week. They're playing a Bears team that's going to go up against Tyson Bagent. By no means is it Bagent. Either way, not a good matchup at all in terms of expecting the Raiders to need to score a lot of points. They could probably get up pretty early and then lean on the running game in this one, especially given that they'll have the backup quarterback. So I'm not super excited about Michael Mayer. I don't think they'll throw the ball a ton this week, so I wouldn't bet on it. But if you need to, you can stream him. For the Bears, DJ Moore's a really low-end wide receiver 3. You're just banking on a super high target share, but this is going to be a really gross offense. Roschon Johnson, he'd be a low-end running back 2, although do keep in mind that he's still in concussion protocol. I don't know exactly if he's going to play. I'm recording this on Friday right now, so we'll see what happens coming into Saturday and Sunday, but if he doesn't clear concussion protocol, I think Deonta Foreman can get started again. It's a decent matchup against the Raiders, and as you'll see, this is a lot of running backs that we really aren't super confident in going forward this week. So if you need to play Deonta Foreman, if Roschon Johnson is out, you could do that. Cole Kmet at the tight end position, he'd be a desperation streaming option. Not someone I'm excited about, but you could use him if you want to. But again, because I don't expect much out of this offense, I would probably look elsewhere. And then anyone I haven't mentioned yet, I'm definitely sitting. So I'm sitting both quarterbacks in this one. I'm going to sit Darnell Mooney. Anyone else that I haven't talked about, I'd make sure they're not in your lineup this week. Next, we've got the Browns at the Colts. Amari Cooper, for me, he'd be a low-end wide receiver 3 for me. He'd be like a low-end wide receiver 2 if Deshaun Watson returns. That's still sort of up in the air. He did practice today on Friday, so we do want to keep that in mind. But Deshaun Watson is just too much of a question mark for me to confidently tell you he's going to play or not. So I think you can play Amari Cooper regardless, but obviously the ceiling's a lot higher for him if Deshaun Watson is active. Jerome Ford, he's a low-end running back 2 this week. Hunt did get quite a bit of work as well last week, but Jerome Ford is pretty clearly the number one running back in this offense. Kareem Hunt's been banged up this week as well, so there is honestly a chance that Kareem Hunt misses this game. If that happens, then obviously Jerome Ford would be a smash start. You're probably playing Jerome Ford regardless because of all the injuries this week, but Jerome Ford, he's a decent play, and then Kareem Hunt, if he plays, he'd be a really desperation play at the running back position. I'd prefer to look elsewhere because he's banged up, and it's not a great matchup against Indianapolis, so I don't think I'd want to do that, but if you absolutely need to, you could. I would sit Elijah Moore and David Njoku. They just haven't been involved enough, and even if Deshaun Watson comes back, I don't want to bet on that yet. I want to see Deshaun Watson play a healthy week before I trust anybody outside of Amari Cooper. For the Colts, Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss, they're both like low-end running back 2 options. It's a really brutal matchup against the Cleveland Browns, who might be the best defense in the NFL so far. We still don't know exactly how the split's going to pan out. I bet it probably ends up being like a 60-40 Jonathan Taylor to Zach Moss split. So Jonathan Taylor is obviously my preferred option here. He's just a more explosive player, but I don't love either one. I think if I had to pick, I'd probably play Jonathan Taylor as like a low-end running back 2, and probably look to sit Zach Moss, but I get it if you need to play him. Michael Pittman, he's a solid wide receiver too, someone that's going to see a ton of volume. This is a team that you can actually pass the ball a decent amount to the wide receivers against the Cleveland Browns. So you can use him if you want to. And then Josh Downs, he'd be like a low-end flex play in PPR only formats. Even in half PPR, I wouldn't be super excited about it. And then I'm going to sit both quarterbacks. Even if Sean Watson's active, it's not something I want to see. I want to see him be healthy. And then Gardner Minshew, he's throwing the ball a ton, but he hasn't looked great, so I don't want to trust him in this one. Also, if you have the Browns defense start them, they're going to be really good this week. Next, we've got the Commanders at the Giants. For the Commanders, Brian Robinson, he's a solid running back too. The Giants are not a very good run defense at all. I think Brian Robinson probably gets in the end zone this week, should be a solid start. And then Terry McLaurin, he's a solid wide receiver too, maybe a low-end wide receiver too, but his career stats against the New York Giants are fantastic. He's had at least 70 receiving yards in every single career game against them. He's clearly the wide receiver 1 in Washington. I think you got to play Terry McLaurin if you have him. Curtis Samuel, he'd be a low-end flex play for me in PPR formats if you want to. He's obviously been good, really good so far this season, but it's not something I want to necessarily chase. I don't think he's necessary to the offense, so you can play him, but I wouldn't be super excited about it. Logan Thomas and Sam Howell, you can both stream both of them. You don't have to play either one of them, but it's a good matchup for Howell, so I think you could certainly play him if you want to. And then Logan Thomas, you're betting on a touchdown or hopefully bounce back performance from last week. I know I said he was a decent streaming option last week, and that one didn't work out, but again, it's a positive matchup, and Logan Thomas has been involved in the offense, so you could use him. For the Giants, Saquon Barkley, obviously in lineups, he had 29 opportunities last week. It's going to be a full go. They need him. They need to get this win if they want to turn their season around by any means. So, and honestly, I think the Giants could win this game. So I think Saquon's a good matchup, a good option here against the mediocre Commanders run defense. Darren Waller, you're probably starting him. You probably don't have a better option, so I think you can use him this week. And then Wan'Dale Robinson's someone I want to talk about, and I really do think you can use him as a flex option, especially in PPR formats. He's just pretty clearly the wide receiver 1 in the offense. He's their most talented pass catcher. Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Darius Slayton are the only 3 wide receivers really running a significant number of routes for this team anymore. Wan'Dale Robinson's got the most guaranteed touches. They use him near the line of scrimmage. They use him out of the backfield a little bit. He's someone that I definitely want to get in my lineup. It's like a low-end flex play, so in deeper leagues, I'm definitely comfortable playing him. And then I'd say every other pass catcher, like I said, Darius Slayton and Jalen Hyatt, they're on the field, but I don't want to trust them. Slayton would be like a really deep league flex play if you want to, and I wouldn't play Jalen Hyatt at all. And I'd set Daniel Jones or Tyrod Taylor, depending on who starts. It's just not something I'm excited about this week. Next, we've got the Lions at the Ravens. For the Lions, I think it's pretty easy. Amon-Ra and Sam Laporta, they're both going to be in your lineups pretty much every single week going forward. Jahmyr Gibbs, he's a running back too. It sounds like he's going to be active, and they've said that he's probably going to get the Lions' share of the work. So you're going to play Jahmyr Gibbs. If he happens to sit for whatever reason, Craig Reynolds would be like a low-end running back too, but it sounds like, if anything, Craig Reynolds is the one who's more likely to miss this game. So I don't think Jahmyr Gibbs is a really solid start this week. I would sit Jameson Williams, Josh Reynolds, and Jared Goff in this one. Williams obviously had the big touchdown last week, but that's kind of fluky. I'm not going to chase it. I want to see him play more snaps, be more involved in the offense. Josh Reynolds is sort of just less necessary with Jameson Williams on the field. And then Jared Goff, Ravens defense isn't bad. His roads versus home splits aren't great either. So even though Jared Goff's been great so far this season, I'd prefer to look elsewhere, although I totally get it. I'd prefer Jared Goff to some of the streaming options I've mentioned. So you can play Jared Goff, but it's just not something that I'm excited about. For the Ravens, Lamar, Andrews, and Zay Flowers are all probably in your lineup. So Zay Flowers is like a low-end wide receiver 2, better off in PPR than non or half. So I could see a world where you have a better option than Zay Flowers, but with 6 teams on bye, with all the injuries, you're probably playing Zay Flowers. I would bench every single Ravens running back. The Lions' run defense is elite. Just don't put yourself through it. You're banking on like a 1-yard rushing touchdown for one of them. I don't know which one it's going to be. Just sit the Ravens running backs. It's not worth the hassle. One of them probably scores a touchdown this week and ends up with an okay game, but I can't tell you which one that's going to be, so I just wouldn't chase it. Next, we've got the Bills at the Patriots. Obviously, for the Bills, Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, they're going to be in your lineups. Gabe Davis is a touchdown-dependent flex play. He's been really good so far up until last week, so you can play him, but it's just I don't think this is the greatest matchup for him. So in the couple of leagues I have Gabe Davis, I am sitting him. James Cook, he's a solid running back too. I think the usage should be a little bit better for him without Damian Harris as well. It's one less mouth to feed in this backfield, and he's obviously been good when given opportunities, and this Patriots defense doesn't scare me. So you can play James Cook, and honestly, I think Latavius Murray is a solid play as well. I have a couple leagues where I picked up Zach Evans and Latavius Murray, and I think I'm going to end up playing Murray over Zach Evans. I think Latavius Murray's got a really good shot to score a touchdown this week. He's obviously going to get the goal line work without Damian Harris there, and they use him in pass protection quite a bit as well, so he could catch a few passes. I think Latavius Murray's a solid option. It's like a desperation running back too if you want to. I would sit both Buffalo tight ends. Neither one has really established themselves, and this offense for Buffalo just hasn't looked good enough that I want to be chasing that right now. For the Patriots, Ramondre Stevenson, he's a running back too. I expect a lot of garbage time in this game. The Bills' run defense actually gives up quite a few yards per carry. We saw Ramondre catch a lot of passes last week, and his snap share was up last week despite leaving the game with an injury at one point. So I think the usage for Ramondre is trending up. I'm pretty excited about him in the one league I traded for. I sort of bought low after week 5. So excited about Ramondre going forward. But I think I'd sit every single other Patriot. I think that if you're in a really desperate, like deep league wide receiver situation, you could potentially pick up and play Kendrick Moore. I don't get what the Patriots are doing. The two games this season where their offense looked even competent, they featured Kendrick Bourne. He's just very clearly their best wide receiver at this point. They really should feature him, but I don't really trust them to make these intelligent coaching decisions. So I'd sit him if I can, but you can probably roster him and see if they make that switch. But I don't think I want to play Kendrick Bourne if I can avoid it. And then I'd sit Hunter Henry and stuff too if you have to. I guess it's a desperation streaming option, but it's not a Patriots offense that I want pieces of right now, so I'd prefer to sit them if I can. Next, we've got the Cardinals at the Seahawks. I think Marquise Brown, he's a low-end wide receiver too, and I think you can stream Joshua Dobbs. I don't love it because the Seahawks defense hasn't been awful by any means lately. They obviously held Joe Burrow to a relatively modest production last week, and on top of that, this is probably the last week you get to start Joshua Dobbs at all. I think Kyler Murray probably comes back in week 8. He returned to practice this week. I doubt he plays this week. I don't think he's been officially ruled out, but I wouldn't count on Kyler Murray playing this week, but this Cardinals offense could get better here pretty soon. I would bench every single Cardinal running back and tight end. Trey McBride sort of got involved last week, so I don't trust Zach Ertz enough because he's not getting all of the work at the tight end position. The running backs, it's sort of a three-headed monster between Dave Mercado, Keontae Ingram, and Damian Williams. I don't want to trust any of that. I would just sit all 3 of them. For the Seahawks, I think Ken Walker's got a legitimate shot to finish as the running back 1 of the week this week. Like, they play the Arizona Cardinals. If you watched the game last week between the Cardinals and the Rams, I think Tyron Williams had over 150 rushing yards in just the second half. The Seahawks are obviously going to want to establish the run. They'll have no problem doing that. So Kenneth Walker's going to have a monster week this week. You definitely got to play him. I think he's a really solid DFS option. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, they're solid wide receiver 2 options. They sort of alternate which weeks they're going to perform at a high level. Could be a Lockett week. He's always really good against the Arizona Cardinals. I think Lockett could be the preferred play for me, honestly, over Metcalf this week, but you're probably playing both of them. Geno Smith, you can use him as a streaming option. My concern is that the Seahawks are just going to run the ball so much and win this game so handily that they're not going to need to air it out. I doubt you get 2 passing touchdowns out of Geno, but it's possible. You could certainly do worse than Geno. And then JSN, he's like a really low-end flex play. Pete Carroll talked him up, saying they're going to use him more going forward. He played 72% of the snaps last week. That was a season high, so he was more involved last week, and they actually missed him on what should have been a really deep passing touchdown as well. So I think a better stretch is coming for JSN, and I don't think he's necessarily be on waivers. In 10-team leagues, he can be, but if you're in a 12-team league or deeper, don't drop JSN. I think better days are coming, and he should probably be on rosters, but I don't want to play him this week if I can. Next, we've got the Steelers at the Rams. For the Steelers, I think Deontay Johnson and George Pickens are both like low-end wide receiver 3s. Deontay Johnson, obviously, the little bit of concern is him coming off of that hamstring injury. There's always the risk of a potential re-aggravation, but he's had a lot of time to recover. They're coming off of the bye, so I think you can play Deontay. And then George Pickens, he was too good while Kenny Pickett was out, so you can probably, Deontay Johnson was out, so you can play George Pickens. Jalen Warren and Najee Harris, they're both like desperation running back plays. Najee, you're banking on him scoring a touchdown. I don't know that happens this week. And Jalen Warren, you're banking on a lot of receptions. And I don't know if this game gets out of hand enough for them to really get into like a hurry up, no huddle, a lot of dump off situations for him. So I don't love either option, but you can play them as like low end running back 2s if you really need to. Fryermuth and Kenny Pickett should be on benches if you can avoid it at all. Sounds like Fryermuth actually re-aggravated that hamstring injury on Thursday, so he's probably not going to be active. He'll probably miss extended time anyway, but both those guys should be on your bench. Matthew Stafford for the Rams, you can stream him. The Steelers' pass defense is certainly one that you can exploit, and Matthew Stafford's actually been really good so far this season, and especially without Kyren Williams or Ronnie Rivers, this is going to be a team that's probably just going to lean on their passing game. They should have a lot of success doing that. So I think Stafford is actually one of my favorite streaming options this week. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua both need to be in lineups. Absolutely, they're both going to be probably the wide receiver ones this week, guys, that I'm super excited about. Zach Evans would be like a desperation running back too, but I'm kind of scared about it. Sean McVay named all 4 running backs on the roster, Zach Evans, Royce Freeman, Darrell Henderson, and Myles Gaskin, as guys that they would expect to get work in practice and see who's going to end up taking on the snaps. Zach Evans has 4 career carries. They all came last week. He didn't look particularly good in them. Royce Freeman's going to be a guy that will trust in pass protection. Darrell Henderson knows the system from before, so I really don't know which of these guys ends up getting the lion's share of the work. We know it's a valuable spot in this offense because of how good Kyren Williams has been so far, and if one of them ends up getting all of it, it's going to be a really good play for them, but I don't know which one that's going to be. I would bet Zach Evans over the other 3, but I bet it ends up just being a really gross timeshare. I don't really want to play Zach Evans. Like I said, I've got 2 leagues where I'm really desperate at running back. I've got 1 league where I've got Connor and Montgomery banged up, and then I have Miles Sanders on bye. So I'm really hurting at my running back 2 behind Saquon in that league. I picked up Zach Evans and Latavius Murray in that league, and I think I'm going to play Latavius Murray over Zach Evans. So that sort of gives you the gauge of how worried I am about Zach Evans right now. Next, we've got the Chargers at the Chiefs, and what should be a pretty fun game. Obviously, for the Chargers, Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, they're in your lineups every single week. They've been fantastic so far this season. You've got to keep playing those guys. Joshua Palmer, he's a solid wide receiver 3 option. There was a little bit of concern last week that it popped up on the injury report with a groin injury, but I actually thought he looked really good. He ended up with 10 PPR fantasy points, and on top of that, he actually had 2 pretty big plays called back. He had a 20-yard pass called back to a penalty and a 25-yard touchdown reception called back to a penalty. He actually could have had a much bigger game. This should be a week against the Chiefs. They're going to have to score a lot of points. So I think Joshua Palmer is a solid wide receiver 3 option, even though the Chiefs defense is actually pretty good. Gerald Everett, he's a solid streaming option as well. He's involved in this offense. He's definitely their most talented tight end. They'll utilize him. He's probably the 4th target in the offense behind Palmer. You've obviously got Eckler and Keenan ahead of both of them, but he's involved in the offense. He's got a good shot to score every single week, so you can play Gerald Everett if you want to. For the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco, they need to be started every single week. Pacheco has been far more involved this season than I thought he was going to be going into the year. He looks like he was one of the steals of the draft so far, so I'm definitely playing Pacheco. And then obviously we know about Mahomes and Kelce. I would sit everyone else for the Chiefs, though. I think that Rashee Rice could be used like a low-end flex play. He's sort of coming on. We saw Justin Watson dislocate his elbow last week. Should open up more opportunity for Rashee Rice to potentially see the field a little bit more, although I will note the Chiefs just brought Mecole Hardman back onto their roster, so we'll see how this wide receiver room shakes out. I don't think Mecole Hardman really pushes anybody off the field except maybe NVS, but Rashee Rice, he's a low-end flex play just because he's clearly the most talented wide receiver in this offense. I think he needs to be rostered, and I think better days are ahead, but I probably want to see the usage flip before I trust him in my lineup. But if you're desperate, you could definitely play Rashee Rice if you really need to. Next, we've got the Packers at the Broncos. For the Packers, I think Jordan Love is a really solid streaming option. I'm playing him personally in one of my leagues, so I'm right there with you guys with saying I think he's a decent option. The Broncos defense, we know how bad it is, and I think Jordan Love should be finally equipped with all of his weapons on offense, so it should be a good week for him. Aaron Jones, speaking of those weapons, should absolutely be started. I'm excited about him, glad to see him healthy, and especially against the bad Broncos defense, it should be a good week for him. A.J. Dillon, obviously, I didn't list him here, but I'm not playing A.J. Dillon. It's just too gross. If Aaron Jones is active, I don't trust him at all. Outside of that, for the Packers, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, they're flex options for me. I sort of want to see how this wide receiver room shakes out once everybody's on the field and healthy. Last week was sort of just a really gross week for the Packers. It's not something that last week was their bye, but the previous week was really gross. We'll see how things shake out. I want to see things before I really trust either one of them, but I think you can play them in the flex if you need to. Luke Musgrave, he's a decent streaming option at the tight end position. The Broncos give up the most points to opposing tight ends in the NFL right now, so Luke Musgrave, it's a good matchup. He's involved downfield. They use him in the offense. You could certainly do a lot worse than Musgrave this week. For the Broncos, I think Russ is actually a decent streaming option. I do prefer Jordan Love this week. In fact, in that league where I have where I'm starting Jordan Love, I have Russ on my bench. Those are my 2 quarterbacks. So I am putting my money where my mouth is there, saying that I prefer Jordan Love over Russell Wilson this week. I think I'm benching all the running backs for the Broncos, although I think that the Javonte and Jaleel McLaughlin, they can be used as like desperation running back 2s. The Packers are an okay matchup for opposing running backs. Javonte looked a lot better last week, and now they've got 10 days rest. So Javonte would be my preferred option between the 2 of them. Seems more and more like we're just going to see less P. Ryan going forward, and then we'll have a lot of a two running back backfield between Javonte and McLaughlin. I think Javonte, though, he just hasn't looked great. He doesn't look explosive. He doesn't look like he can really house anything, so you're banking on a short touchdown. This Broncos offense doesn't look good enough that I want to trust them to get near the goal line very often, so I'd probably bench both of them if I can. Courtland Sutton, he's a touchdown-dependent wide receiver 3. You're banking on a touchdown, but you could do worse. Jerry Jeudy, he's a low-end flex play, but I don't really know if I trust it. It's just he's obviously got one foot out the door there. And then can the Broncos just please start using Marvin Mims? You obviously can't play him yet. We're hoping they trade Jeudy or something here soon, but Mims is too explosive a player. I think you've got to keep rostering him, and eventually the opportunities are going to show up for him. Next up, we've got the Dolphins at the Eagles. This one, finally, we got a good primetime game. This one hopefully doesn't let us down. I'm expecting a lot of points in this one. It should be a lot of fun. Needs to be a bounce-back week for the Eagles, too, so really am expecting a really high-scoring game here. Obviously, you're going to start everyone here. Tua, Raheem Mostert, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, they're all smash plays. They've got to be in your lineup for sure. Raheem Mostert, obviously the Eagles' run defense is fantastic, but the touchdown upside's too big for Mostert. You've got to keep playing him. I would bench all of the other Miami running backs. It sounds like this could be the week that Jeff Wilson comes back. I don't really want to trust any of that. I'm probably just going to end up playing Mostert only until Devon Achane comes back. For the Eagles, Jalen Hurts, DeAndre Swift, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, they're all in your lineups pretty much every single week. It's not a very big decision. I know Devonta Smith's been a bit of a letdown so far the last several weeks, but the volume's there for him. He's involved in the offense. He had 11 targets last week. I just want to get him in my lineup. Sooner or later, a big week is coming. Keep an eye on Devonta Smith, though, with that hamstring injury. I know that it's possible he misses the game. He popped up on the injury report. I still expect him to play here, but and if he plays, obviously, then you're going to play him. Unless you're absolutely stacked at the wide receiver position, I'd probably just let it ride out. Understand, though, that this is a little bit of a concern, given that this is a Sunday night game. That means that if he ends up being a game-time decision, you need to have a pivot for the guys in the Monday night game. So you'd be looking at either a Viking or a Niner wide receiver, or potentially a running back if you want to put Devonta Smith in your flex. So just keep that in mind, that you might need a pivot for Devonta Smith if he doesn't get declared out or active earlier on. But otherwise, I think it's pretty easy in this game. You're starting everyone that we would normally be starting. And finally, we've got the Monday Night Football matchup between the 49ers and the Vikings. I might be crazy, but I sort of think the Vikings are going to win this game. So maybe I'm crazy for that, but I sort of do think that's going to happen. That being said, I think Brock Purdy is a solid streaming option. I'd be less confident in it if Debo and CMC miss this game. With that being said, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, they're in your lineups, especially if Debo and CMC miss. Those two are going to be super important to the offense. They'll get a ton of looks, and they should be very important. Debo and CMC, you're going to start them if they're active. They're too involved in the offense. They're too good of players. I'd be a little bit more concerned with Debo if he plays. If you have a better option, I think you can look elsewhere, just because we know we have that example earlier on this season of Debo Samuel being used as a decoy during a game. We know that it's possible that Debo Samuel just sort of ends up not being a focal point of the offense and could be out there even if he's not healthy. So keep that in mind with Debo, but unless you have a much better option, you're probably just forced to play him. For the Vikings, Kirk Cousins, he's a low-end quarterback 1. I think they'll have relatively decent success passing the ball against the 49ers defense. You can kind of move the ball against the 49ers defense through the air. I know it's not elite or not a great matchup, but I think you can do that. Madison, he's a running back 2 by default. Obviously, the matchup's brutal. I wouldn't expect a lot of touchdown upside here for him, but he's going to get volume. We know how bad the running back position is, especially this week where we're talking about guys like Deonta Foreman, Zach Evans, Latavius Murray. So you're going to play Alexander Madison. Jordan Addison and KJ Osborne, they're solid wide receiver 3 options. They're really involved in the offense. They are the number 1 and number 2 for the offense. You've got to play them probably if you have them, although you could potentially have better options. But I think they're solid streaming options, solid wide receiver 3 or flex pieces if you want to use them. TJ Hawkinson, he's a must start. He's the wide receiver 1 effectively in this offense now. Super involved, probably gets in the end zone at some point here soon as well. I know it's been a while for him, but I'm expecting big things for Hawkinson. I think you definitely got to play him. And then not listed here, Brandon Powell. I'd prefer to sit him if I can. He's like a really deep league streaming option as a flex player, but I'd prefer to look elsewhere if I can. Oh, and then obviously, I didn't mention it. There's the 2 49er running backs, Jordan Mason and Elijah Mitchell. If CMC misses this game, I think Jordan Mason, he ends up being the guy that sits behind Elijah Mitchell. You probably see Elijah Mitchell take the majority of the snaps. I think you could play Elijah Mitchell as a low-end running back too. Same thing with Jordan Mason if CMC is inactive, but I would prefer Elijah Mitchell, and I'd probably expect this to be more of a split than like a workhorse situation for either one of them. So it's not a super high ceiling option, but I think you can play both running backs if CMC misses. That'll do it for this week's video, where I've went over every single matchup this weekend and sort of gone over which players I think can be in your fantasy lineups and which players shouldn't be. I hope you guys got anything out of this video. If there was any specific start-sit questions or any players that I didn't touch on, feel free to let me know in the comments. As always, if you have any specific questions, I'm happy to help you guys and give you guys my opinion. So, should be a big week. Like I said, I think we got a lot of really fun matchups here, and I think it should be hopefully a bounce-back week from what was a really low-scoring fantasy performance just across the board last week. So, hopefully we get a lot more scoring this week. Should be a lot of fun, and really excited. This will be the halfway point for the regular season in fantasy football. Most of us have 14 regular season weeks before the playoffs, so pretty good midpoint. We can sort of reflect and see what we got to do going forward. So, Sunday morning, 1 hour before the early morning games kick off, so 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. Eastern time, I'll be doing my live stream. I'll go over all the last-minute injury updates, go over last-second start-sit questions that you guys might have. So I'll see you guys there if you want to hop in. Would appreciate to get as many of you guys as possible. It's a lot of fun interacting with you guys live and sweating out those last-second decisions with all you guys. So I appreciate all the time watching the videos. If you haven't already and you want to make sure you get access to all the videos going forward, just subscribe to the channel. We're at like 890 subscribers. Would love to hit 1,000 by the end of the NFL season. So it's about 10 more each week. I think we can get there if you guys just, like I know a lot of you watch the videos and you haven't subscribed already. So if that's you, just subscribe. If you're here to watch the videos anyway, you might as well be subscribed and make sure you get access and don't miss any of them. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.